So here's what I want to talk about this morning, and we'll talk for about a half an hour. I want to talk about what it means to be an educational innovator. So many of us follow a variety of philosophies in education. We've got our classical educators. We have our unschoolers at the other end of the continuum. We've got hardcore Charlotte Mason people who follow, the Ambleside online. And then we've got Charlotte Mason light inspired people who, like her principles, but don't necessarily follow every jot and tittle in the books. We have people who are using textbooks and following a K-12 program, and then others who are eclectic. They pull a little from here and a little from there, and they kind of piece together their own program. What do all of these homeschoolers have in common? What do homeschoolers of a variety of educational philosophies have in common? That's kind of what I want to talk about today. Because in our desire to craft a homeschool that matches some ideal, we are naturally excluding other philosophies of education. Just by choosing to be home and not putting our kids in school, we're saying something about learning, about schooling, about education, aren't we? One of the first things that we're saying about school, the brick building, what are they made of out west? I can't even remember. Cement, stucco? What are we saying about the building that houses kids down the street? We're saying that somehow the trained, credentialed staff, the bureaucrats who organize the system, are not as good at educating as you are in a house with cats and dishes in the sink and, printer ink that's missing so you can't Xerox or photocopy that one lesson you were planning to do today. Am I right? Do any of you have that experience? I know I did. I was always this person who thought I could plan ahead, and then I would be in the moment with this brilliant idea and, printer ink is gone. Or in my case, we couldn't photocopy at home back in the dark ages of homeschooling before the internet. I'd have to plan to drive to a print shop with the book to Xerox off the pages. That was a bridge too far with 5 small children. So when we're talking about this educational environment that we're creating, we're literally saying, with all those flaws, babies that spit up, dogs that pee in the wrong room, children who don't want to cooperate, television in the background, we're saying that's superior to the trained, credentialed teachers in the building who went to college to teach your children how to read. We're saying that we're better for our kids than them. I mean, how audacious is that? How bold is that declaration? It's hilarious how true that is. And we do it with very little sort of anxiety. I mean, yes, you all have worries and anxieties, but I have yet to meet a parent who is attracted to homeschooling who isn't weirdly confident that home environment is going to do a better job. They may feel deficient in math. I've met homeschool moms who are worried that they aren't organized enough. But rarely are they thinking to themselves, I wish I had a credential, or it would be so much better if we were in a building with a lot of other kids. No, there is something about home that is speaking to an educational aspiration. I want us to talk about what that is. So let's start there. What is it about home in the word homeschool that makes you confident that what you're doing is going to be a good education for your kids? Just start putting things in the comments. I want to hear about it. And if you would, share this broadcast. Let's get more people in on this conversation. I want to know, why are you courageous in bringing your kids home and educating them not in the school? What is it about this environment that is a challenge to traditional education, that is sticking it to the man, you hippie homeschoolers of the 21st century? What is it? Hey, Kim. Hey, Kristen. Hey, Lindsay. I love seeing you joining. Thank you for coming. Safety. Oh, wow. That's a top priority right now. My gosh, it feels like you can't go anywhere public without risking getting shot. Yeah, so there is a safety component for sure. And safety does produce a certain kind of receptivity to learning. Cats. Oh, yeah. I remember listening to broadcast, I believe it was, by someone I really respect. And she was talking about ways to encourage emotional health in your own life. And she said, get a pet, something you can stroke on a regular basis. There's something about stroking the fur and feeling the live heartbeat and the gentleness of that pet that helps you get grounded. So yeah, imagine your child doing homeschool and petting a cat. Correct pacing. Oh, goodness. One of the things we know about home, you don't have to follow a schedule. I mean, you can try. Nobody lives up to it. I mean, if your husband texts you and says, hey, I need something right now, don't you stop in the middle of the math lesson to respond? We all know the schedule is artificial. So yes, there is this feeling of pacing and attentiveness to the individual that home provides. Freedom. You don't have to follow the rules of school. You don't have to fill out a lot of paperwork, my favorite. You get to explore a rabbit trail if it presents itself. We know what our kids are learning when we teach from home. You know, one of the things I discovered when my oldest child decided to do math at the local public school is that I had no sense of what had been covered in the classroom when he brought his homework home. I couldn't know if something had been taught or not taught, or how it was taught, or how it was presented. I felt like I had a blindfold on the whole time I was assisting with homework. Homeschooling takes the blindfold off. What else? Relationship. Oh my goodness. You can actually rub the shoulders of your child and no one will accuse you of molesting, right? You have the freedom for cuddles, for snuggling under a blanket, for talking one-on-one, for pausing when somebody cries and really attending to the frustration level. That's awesome. Relationship is huge. Letting them have real input. They can follow rabbit trails. They can give their feedback on whether or not the curriculum was satisfying to them. Oh, these are great. Family love, the ability to nurture, teen happiness. Wow. Can you imagine? Happy teens. What a concept. Doing what's best for each child. Fun. Oh my goodness. Deep diving. Oh, I see deep diving a couple of times. Tea and snacks. Yes, Robin, you know I'm all about that. So let's just pause now, scroll through the comments. And what is the common principle? Well, fundamentally, it's freedom in relationship. It's that connection piece. It's that feeling that I belong and I can explore. We believe that so powerfully that if you read educator blogs, which I do for traditional teachers, they talk all the time about how to customize lessons for individual students. They talk about how to give choice. They talk about how to create connections between students and teachers. Literally, the understanding of education has shifted. And where the pioneering is occurring is on the front lines of homeschool. A lot of us romanticize and nostalgize Charlotte Mason, or we look at classical education of, ancient history, whatever, those tutorials of the Middle Ages. And we sort of romanticize them as being the apex of education. But what you need to know is those educational models were innovative for their time. We live in a new era. Technology is absolutely dominant in a way that it was not 100 years ago. And so part of what we're experiencing is this explosion of information and access to it. And we're trying to manage it and distill it into useful boards for learning, creating some kind of a structure that allows your kids to be educated. And so as revolutionary as Charlotte Mason was in her era, you get to be that in yours. You are an educational innovator if you are a homeschooler. And I need you to be taking notes. You paying attention. So much of this self-doubt about whether or not you're doing a good job, let it go. It's time for you to actually embrace your role in contributing to the ongoing discussion of what creates a quality education. And here's what's so cool. You're finding out not just by successes, but by what doesn't work. Now, let's see if we can't take what doesn't work and put that into a new frame of reference for you. Instead of seeing it as failure or somehow demonstrating that you are not qualified to be this homeschooler, What if instead you saw it as data for research? Textbooks with Tommy don't work. Exploring the world when he is well fed works. I'm going to jot that down in my notebook. How can we contribute to the ongoing conversation around education? We can do it by being truthful with our results, by not assuming that somebody else already has it figured out and all I have to do is emulate that person down to the T. We can do it by embracing what doesn't work and admitting that part of this homeschooling project is just a big experiment. And we're adding more detail, more nuanced understanding to what the project of education is when we tell the truth about what doesn't work. So we've just talked about all the good things about being at home with homeschool. So now I want to flip. Tell me what doesn't work at home. What are you learning about what doesn't work? How is home sometimes an impediment to learning? Is it ever? Are there times when you're like, oh my gosh, home is not a great learning context today? What are those moments? Let's tell the freaking truth about home. I'll start so it gives you a minute to post in the comments. So I know for me, when I was told that delight-directed learning was the apex of learning, and I believed it. I read all kinds of books on it. My kids embraced it. But what I noticed as one of the flaws in the ointment is that I did not always have the ability to support 5 individual delight-directed moments in a day. So I sometimes felt scattered and fragmented. And I wanted to support the wood whittling kid over here and the art project over there and the child struggling to read who's really into it. But I felt like there was a limited me to go around. And so what would happen is a child might start down the path of some delight, but there wasn't enough fuel in the tank to keep it going. And I was not able to provide the level of resource and companionship and support, which was really disillusioning because I believed so much in this idea. So that had to be part of my research. I had to think, well, I believe in this principle, but in practicality, it wasn't always working out. What could I do to adapt? And this is the question I want you to ask as you're starting to see this challenge emerge. Always ask yourself, not, am I living up to the ideal, but how can I adapt? What can I do that takes this into account and adapts? So let's see one of the things that you guys are writing. Managing distractions. Oh my gosh, everybody is saying distractions. Distraction, toys, distractions, self-directed learning. Oh gosh, the reason we want self-directed learning is because we're exhausted. It's because of what I just described. You've got 5 kids. If somebody could just do it on their own, now you only have 4 to manage. Unfortunately, I need to let you in on something. Kids like companions. And even in school, nobody's independent. They've got a teacher telling them what to do. And they've got, other students in class with them answering questions and responding to the ideas. Nobody's really learning independently in school. Might they do homework without the mother sitting side by side? Sure. Is that independent? Somebody told them what to do, when it was due, how to do it, and they're going to come back and be accountable the next day. That's not independence. That's just a system of accountability to do work. What we're looking for is this enlivened learning. That's the challenge. So the independence we seek is partly a relief from this distraction, from this feeling of overwhelm, from too many kids. Somebody says it's really hard when you get called away for messes and toddlers. Amen, sister. I remember doing copy work with 3 kids and the other 2 kept climbing on the table, knocking over the candle, knocking over the pens. We'd have candle wax, sliding down my new table, ruining the finish. Oh yeah, that happened. I tell you, add candles to copy work. I believe you're all going to write me back and say, you didn't tell me my kid was going to dip his finger in the candle wax the whole time. Yeah, they do that. They did that in my house. So as we're considering these things, we're going to try out some idea and then it's not going to work. Instead of assuming the idea is flawed, I want you to start thinking about how to adapt. You're an educational innovator. You're not a failed unschooler. You're not a flawed, eclectic schooler. You're not a, novice classical educator. You are an educational innovator hitting the limits of a system. And it's your job to adapt, to start thinking about, well, how do we solve the issues of home and school? In schools, they do reviews. They have in-service training days for teachers. They meet as a staff outside of school hours to talk about ways to improve their programs. They send teachers away to conferences. What do? We just give ourselves a thumbs up on a good day and a thumbs down on a bad day, and we think it's our fault. Heck no. You are actually learning the struggle of educating children. And you're doing it in this new context, relatively new, 40 years now. And you're figuring it out one child, one act, one subject, one grade level at a time. What else? You don't have time to plan lessons and time for self-care. Robin, what a true story. You know what I discovered? So one of my adaptations when I was home educating, when I realized that I was so tempted to do open and go curriculum, you know what open and go means? It means blessedly you don't have to read the directions. That's what you think, right? And yet I found that the best programs had directions. And if I read the directions, those programs went better. And then I could actually enjoy using them. But I never had time to read the directions or plan a lesson. So I was looking for this thing that helped match my franticness around learning, which was, we should be doing activity all day, every day. I don't have time to prepare, so I better just have something I can open and use right now to keep the activity going. How many of you have experienced that? So you know what I discovered? Hang that idea. I'm going to read the lesson plan smack dab in the middle of the day. I'm going to park my children in front of PBS for 4 hours, and I'm just going to sit at the table and drink tea and nurse the baby and read the instructions for a day. I'm going to practice with the Cuisinart rods. I'm going to try out one of the worksheets, and my kids are just going to be, glued to the TV. Now, today, you'd probably hand them each an iPad. But back then, all I had was the video and the television. And I'm going to actually learn what I need to learn. You know why? One day invested like that gives me weeks of peace because I actually know what I'm doing now. I'm not set up in a way that leaves me bewildered or desperate or frantic. And I'm not blaming the program. Now I'm actually interested in sharing the insights I got from the program. Or I read the instructions and I think, good grief, what was I thinking? This is so not me. No way am I going to try and implement this. Hello, teaching reading in 100 lessons. That's what happened to me. I was like, what? I don't want to do this. This is so not me. See what I mean? So one of the things that I have noticed is, if we're talking about self-care, one of the best ways to care for yourself as an educator is to feel prepared and to take time in the middle of the day when you're alert, you've had enough to eat, you've had enough sleep, and you actually go ahead and do that planning, do that preparation. But that's something I had to learn. I had to adapt. There was no one telling me that it was okay to, at 11 in the morning, put your kids in front of the TV so you could learn how to teach them. I'm here to tell you that's an innovation that worked for me. Nancy says her son stalls every single subject, and often start out excited on a subject and book, but end up frustrated that he stalls his learning so much. So one of the very interesting things about home is that we're dealing with different paces of learning and different personalities of parents. So what might feel like a natural, easy pace for you is going to not feel that way for a son. One of the things I do when I teach about copy work is that I often suggest that parents try copying a foreign language like Greek or Hindi, literally where the letters are foreign to you. You could start with something like Dutch with Roman alphabet. Pick a language you don't speak, type into Google Translate some passage, translate it into that language, and then I want you to copy at the table while your other kids are doing copy work. Your appreciation for how challenging it is to handwrite and the patience required will change. Whenever you have a child who is slower or struggling or stalling, a lot of times what's going on is that child and you are out of sync. And that is a challenge of homeschooling. That's absolutely one we want to problem solve together with a child. And we want their input, and we want to try other alternatives. Some people say that it's challenging that they don't have more of a group together, like classmates or a community. Now, a lot of homeschoolers have solved that by joining co-ops, but not all co-ops are created equal either. Sometimes joining a co-op is like signing up for the seventh circle of hell, based on what I've heard from some co-op families. You know, the pressure, the performance, the level of homework that's given. You get to decide whether a co-op is supporting and serving your homeschool or undermining it. You get to decide that. But co-ops can provide that social outlet. So can martial arts. So can select soccer. So can acting classes. There are so many ways for your kids to have an outlet. Will it be similar to school? No, it's going to be different. One way I solved it when I was young, and for about 5 years of our lives, all my good friends moved to the same street. We all lived in these condos on the same street. So there was one point where 5 homeschooling families lived on the same street. If you can work that out, I'm telling you, that's awesome. Sometimes apartment and condo life is way better than suburban house life, by the way. Just a hot tip, something else I discovered in my own education research. Heather says, doing high school level math again with my kids gives me so much more patience for their attempts and mistakes at algebra. That's right. In fact, one of the things I discovered with even my kids working on writing at high school is that I had forgotten how challenging it is to think through arguments that are not your family's perspective. It's so tempting to just disqualify all the material out there that doesn't agree with your family. And once you're an adult, you're so good at filtering through a variety of perspectives, you forget that that's like a brand new skill for a young person. And so when they pop out with something that goes totally against your family culture, we're supposed to embrace it as parents, but we don't always. We start out with defensiveness or confusion, or, we're trying to help them grow a brain. So that's another way that home is challenging. We haven't ever had teenagers before. Now we suddenly have teenagers. And all these trained experts at the local high school have been trained to work with teens. And we thought this like cozy, cuddly, young child relationship was going to carry on into high school because we did it better. We breastfed her, co-slept her, had really nice date nights with all of our kids. We took them to the movies and coffee. And we thought, oh, that's just going to carry over into the teen years. And then they're teens. They actually act like teenagers. Yeah. Doesn't mean you won't have a good relationship. What I'm saying is you will have new challenges because each stage and age changes, and so do you. And so as you're this educational innovator, experiment, explore, put what doesn't work in one column and what's working in the other, and give yourself credit for trying. And when you come up against a brick wall of how home is not supporting education, adapt. Adapt. Now, the only way you can successfully adapt is if you put all the options on the table. I'm going to say that again. The only way you can adapt is if you put all the options on the table. In other words, sometimes you got to borrow from traditional education models. Sometimes it helps me to listen to podcasts for teachers because they're talking about stuff homeschoolers don't talk about, but they care about learning and they care about education, and they are problem solving and troubleshooting as well. And what we want to do as homeschoolers is contribute to that conversation. We all value children. We all want them to learn. And homeschooling is just this brand new sort of innovative. It's really not new. We know that people have been homeschooled for centuries, but this movement of homeschooling in the modern era is a challenge to status quo public education. Yes, it is. That's the whole purpose of it. And we want to get more self-aware about that. We want to go meta, look over the shoulder of homeschool, not be so in it all the time. Pause and observe. Somebody told me that my child would learn everything she needed if I just let her do whatever she wanted. And then you watch in your house and it doesn't seem to be working out that way. So then we double down. Well, I must be secretly still resenting her for, wandering around the house like a nomad. Or maybe it's just, there's more to learn here about this delight directed thing. Maybe it isn't just a switch you flip. Maybe it does require some partnering and some learning together and some experimenting and some supplying of resources. What would those be? Which ones are the best ones for me to explore? So the bottom line is this. You're not just a homeschooler. You are a part of the ongoing conversation around education. Let me say that again. You are not just a homeschooler. You are a part of the ongoing conversation around education. You're a researcher, you're a practitioner, you're an educational innovator, every bit as much as Charlotte Mason was. And your credentials come from being in the trenches, making decisions, testing your theories, and finding out what works and doesn't work for your family. And when you come back and share what does and doesn't work, you enrich the sense of what homeschooling can be. You give everyone an opportunity to now compare what they're doing with what you suggested. You actually advance the cause of education when you do that. You don't advance the cause of education when you hold to strict beliefs and expect people to live up to those and assume that if they run into obstacles, it's because they are not adhering correctly. That does not advance education. You want to know something? That's why public school is flawed. They are so locked into their view about grades, performance, Common Core, how to move up the grade levels, what it means to teach. They get so locked in that prism, they can't get out of it. And they keep just trying to tweak the prism. Don't fall for it. And don't fall for it with homeschool philosophies. You get to be the zippy little ship that can shift and change and go different directions. You are not the Titanic. And anyone who tries to talk you into a certain vision when it isn't working right now for your family doesn't understand your family. You do, though, and you get to adapt. You get to help your kids have a different educational experience. One of the places we talk about this stuff all the time because we're obsessed is in my coaching community called the Homeschool Alliance. And I mention that because I forget to all the time. It is designed to support this educational innovation, to help you have a place to contribute to the ongoing understanding of what learning can be for your kids. You can go to coachjuliebogart.com and sign up there if you want to join us. This month, I'm doing 2 webinars. One is for kids 0 to 12, and the other is for teens. So if you've got kids in either of those age groups, which I know you do, we are going to talk about their developmental stages and how to adapt and how to make good adjustments that further the educational objectives while preserving the relationship. That's our whole goal. That's what we do in that space. So if you're looking for more of this kind of encouragement, support, and ongoing conversation, the Homeschool Alliance is the place to do it. CoachJulieBogart.com. So let me leave you with this. Home is a fabulous space for education. And I highly recommend that you homeschool. I believe in it with my whole heart. What we want to do is start hearing each other's experiences and learning from one another and making adjustments and adaptations so that our families go from surviving to thriving. And if you're in between those two, survival and thriving, that's the most natural state of homeschool. You're a little survival and a little thrival. Okay? That's just normal life when you have a family and you're home together all the time. Throw education into the mix, you end up with a pretty good homeschool, and that's good enough. Okay? Somewhere between surviving and thriving, that's where we all live all the time. On those days you thrive, write about it so you don't forget. On the days where you're barely surviving, pour yourself a cup of tea and park your kids in front of the TV. You have my permission. All right. Have a great day. It was fun meeting with you today. I'm just going to mention that I am doing a series over at Free Homeschool 101 every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And that series is all about writing. It's a broadcast just like this one. So feel free to hop over there and follow along. And I will see you Thursday if that's something you're interested in. Otherwise, I will be back here on Monday next week. By the way, new podcast up today, and it's a doozy. This is probably one of my favorites. Brian and Tywana Smith share about their homeschool experience and the passing of their daughter. And they are good friends of mine, and their daughter is in particular someone who is very special. So go to the podcast today, Brave Writer, and please listen. Give them the gift of listening. There are no ads or anything on this podcast. It's all just about preserving the memory of Shana and learning how to support one another when we go through the most difficult challenges as families. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining me. Love you very much. Mwah. Live honestly, write bravely. I'm Julie Bogart from Brave Writer. See you next